For Wales and northern England by the end of the afternoon, but further south it stays largely dry and bright with some sunshine. Monday looks drier and brighter for many, likewise for Tuesday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, mate.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello, good evening. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom. Here are the top stories. The Minister for Trade Policy, Conor Burns, has been sacked from the government after a complaint of serious misconduct earlier this week. The MP has had the party whip suspended whilst an investigation into allegations of inappropriate behaviour takes place. A spokesperson for Number 10 says the Prime Minister has been clear that the highest standards in public life must be upheld. Mr Burns says he will fully cooperate with the investigation. 3 people have died in an explosion at a service station in Ireland. Multiple people have been injured, with more feared to be trapped at the Applegreen station in Cresler, County Donegal. A search and rescue operation involving sniffer dogs continues in what police are calling a serious ongoing incident. Ireland's Taoiseach Micheál Martin has described the incident as very traumatic. The UK and Ireland have said they'll work towards resolving the stalemate over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Following a meeting between British and Irish officials in London, both parties reaffirmed their commitment to reinstate an executive at Stormont by October the 28th. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said conversations with Britain had improved and there was a genuine effort to solve the problems which had emerged after Brexit. A man armed with a knife has been shot dead by armed officers in a police station car park in Derby. Derbyshire Constabulary said officers were sent to the scene just before 10 this morning. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has been informed. Here's Deputy Chief Constable Kate Maynell.
During the incident, a window was smashed at the police station. Armed officers were sent to the scene and a police firearm was then discharged. No officers, staff or other members of public were injured during the incident. It is not believed to be linked to counter-terrorism at this time. However, enquiries are ongoing. As you can see, a cordon is in place and Ascot Drive is currently closed and is likely to remain so while the investigation continues.
The United Nations has passed a motion to investigate alleged human rights abuses in Russia. Nearly 50 countries brought the motion to appoint an independent expert, including Britain. The Human Rights Council accused Moscow of creating a climate of fear through repression and violence. But Russia says the motion contains false allegations. It's the first time an expert has been appointed to investigate the rights record of a permanent member of the Security Council. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's headliners.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers, tonight in the company of the brilliant comedians Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. Oh, there goes our talent budget for the rest of the week. And we'll start with the front pages, and let's have a look at the Daily Mail first of all. Beat diabetes with NHS diet. Prescription soup and shakes could reverse 500 cases a week. The Daily Telegraph, minister sacked in new Tory sleaze row. Conor Burns stripped of the whip over claims of sexual misconduct at party conference. Biden's nuclear Armageddon warning is unwise, says Emmanuel Macron. And foreign aid spending targeted for new cuts. The Independent next. Tory minister sacked in fresh sleaze scandal, calling back that story I've just quoted to you from the Telegraph and the Mail. And that's Conor Burns, a trade minister who's been told to leave with immediate effect. He's lost the Tory whip as an investigation is conducted. FT now, renewables groups face price caps, and Pink Floyd's $500 million song catalogue sale hits a wall after banned in fighting. The Times now, parents get cash payout in childcare reform plan. Liz Truss is drawing up plans to overhaul the convoluted subsidised childcare system that could simply hand money directly to families instead. Daily Express number 10 hit by row over Brexit freedoms. A cabinet rift between Suella Braverman and the Prime Minister on slashing immigration. The Sun next. GMC investigates top TV medic. Holly and Phil Dock in sex probe. Dr. T. John Esho, who's this morning's resident cosmetic doctor, is being probed with allegations of sexual misconduct. And last but not least, the Daily Star. Panicked Brits rush to stockpile candles over blackout fears. Candle sales have soared in the past week as panic buyers try to head off blackouts. No news yet on fork handle purchases. 4 candles. There's a reference for the teenagers, and those are your front pages. Well, let's kick off with Saturday's Telegraph and nuclear Armageddon, Steve. Great news.
Keep it light. Yeah, the end of the world again. So this is, although it's not, and that's important to say, because Biden apparently went off script when he was saying that things are scary in terms of nuclear war. I believe the quote was, he said that the world was closer to nuclear war than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And obviously, Joe Biden is so old he remembers when Cuba was formed out of the megacontinent Pangaea. But the officials then scrambled to say this is not based on intelligence. This is fair enough to warn and raise the issue of the threat, but thankfully there's nothing saying this is going to happen, which is good. I don't want to have to sit there preparing for this, watching When the Wind Blows. I can't put a mattress up against the wall. I got memory foam. Those things weigh a ton.
Then we can all agree it's not based on intelligence. So sorry, I had to make that joke. It was just sitting there. I'm sorry.
It was an open goal.
It was an open goal. I'll let you finish the sentence.
I'm picking on him for being old. You don't have to go for his IQ as well. Come on, I'm giving you this much. But then, I mean, the flip side would be, while all the officials are saying, despite the bellicose rhetoric, I love bellicose as a word, that there's no sign this is going to happen, we were sat here in January saying, oh, he's probably not going to invade. So there's still that spectre of worry, but thankfully nothing's been raised up the old threat level.
Yeah, if you get bellicose, by the way, you just need like an antacid, like a sort of Pepto-Bismol, or maybe Settler's Tums is always the option.
I'm a Rennie's kind of guy.
No, there you go. Look, I tell you something, it does make your stomach turn because we can't talk ourselves into a hot war. We've got to be very careful about the sort of diplomatic language that's used, haven't we? And of course, Biden, you could argue, has a bit of previous on this, having previously suggested that there must be regime change in Moscow, which then the White House sort of rapidly refuted. contradicted their own president.
I remember talking with you about that, because if it would have been Trump doing it, people would have been saying, oh, it's just how he does it. I suppose the expectation is different with Biden, but in a sense, you've just got a guy out there ignoring the auto cue, just saying stuff. So it's kind of continuity.
But do you think Biden, when he goes off script, is he just saying the things he really thinks, or is he just gone a bit mad?
I think it's impossible to know. There is the chance. There's not an inconsiderable chance he doesn't know where he is.
Because the truth is that, I mean, it's not a good look for him, is it, the leader of the free world, to be rebuked by Emmanuel Macron in this way, the French president. I mean, what can we read into Macron's intervention here? What does it tell us?
He's just being sensible. If you strip out the lack of sense in this, the story disappears. So someone says something that's not sensible. If you ignore that from the story, I think you're agreeing with Macron. I never thought that had happened.
I know.
But, write that down in the diaries. But,
I feel a bit dizzy now. And, you know, that's made me bellicose, that.
Oh, you want to get some of that settler's tongues.
How are your stomach juices tonight, Nick Dixon?
They're fine. I mean, do you want me to comment on the story, or do you guys want to do the...
Yeah, why don't you give us a little bit of a reflux on what you think about that particular story?
Biden, is, like you say, he's gone off script. He's at a private fundraiser. There's no cameras there, so he just says what he wants. And he's done the exact opposite of what you should do. He's escalated. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, which he's comparing this to, famously, they did everything they could to de-escalate. If you've seen that movie, 13 Days, they do everything they can to not even let the information get out. And there's a bit, I don't know if it's literally happened, but there's a scene where one of the US pilots is flying over, doing a reconnaissance mission, and he gets shot at. He's flying over Cuba. And the guy in charge tells him, well, Kennedy's guy calls him up and says, pretend it was bird strike, so don't even say that they've shot at you, because then that'll escalate it. Then the press start demanding war, the military want war, so we have to de-escalate. What Biden's done is the exact opposite. He's pointlessly escalated this and said it's like Cuba. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, you wouldn't say, hey, this is Armageddon. The whole point you were trying to say it wasn't. So it's terrible. He's gone completely against his administration, because they're saying it's just saber rattling, but he's said, no, it's nuclear apocalypse. So I think it's... And there'll be inevitable comparisons to Trump, but what Trump did was he was publicly very aggressive and outrageous with people like... with North Korea, which actually weirdly worked. So his tactic was to publicly be aggressive, whereas Biden, there's no tactics involved here. He's just at a fundraiser letting his mouth run, essentially.
Maybe the tactic is, because he's at a fundraiser, loads of really rich people, maybe they like to hear about the chance of nuclear apocalypse because they've got bunkers. For them, it's just, oh, finally, we get to use the thing that we've had stocked for years. So maybe they like it.
But we know that, of course, Nancy Pelosi, a significant figure in the Democratic Party, flew to Taiwan a few weeks ago. Are the White House smarting for a hot war?
You think so, to pull focus? I don't think they need to pull focus for the old. They'll wait until nearer the election before you start a war. That's how you do it, isn't it?
True, it's a bit early.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, let's hope none of that happens, because we're going to talk about matters closer to home now in The Telegraph. And if you don't know how to save energy, don't rely on the government to tell you. Nick?
Yeah, Downing Street blocks energy-saving information campaign. We covered this the other night. I said it was a fairly pointless nanny state intervention. The price of energy and common sense will stop you using excessive energy. I don't think we need a text message from the government. I feel like we've had enough of those during lockdown, enough guidance, do you know what I mean? Enough nudging for a lifetime, for me anyway.
When I was a student, I stopped drinking when I ran out of money.
Yeah, you didn't need a text. Probably wouldn't have been, well, there wouldn't have been text in your era, but you didn't need a telegram or a letter.
There was actually, it was a pigeon.
OK.
Called Barry.
So the point is, Mark, weirdly about this, actually, they're saying that Jacob Rees-Mogg had signed off on it and now Truss has gone against it. When I read the story the other day, it sounded like Mogg didn't really think it was necessary, so I don't know how passionate he was about this, but Truss has gone against it because she's ideologically opposed to telling people what to do, which I think is reasonable. Do we really need the government telling you not to use your washing machine at night and stuff like that? So I think it was personally pointless. Some people may back it, but...
But to that point, then, so if you think that people don't need any information that they will know the correct amount of use, well, we'll find out, because if there is a blackout because too much use, I guess you'll be proved wrong.
Yeah, presumably they'd say something before blackout level. Do you think they'd just let there be a blackout?
So you think we need information at some point, but we don't need it now?
I see what you're trying to do. You're like John Humphreys. I didn't know I was on the spot.
Yeah, he's definitely got you on the ropes. I'm going to go off-brand here, and I'm going to say that there's no harm in the government offering advice or information And I think perhaps we could have had that during the pandemic, where the authorities said, look, here's COVID, here's what we know, here's the threat, and here's what you need to do if you're worried. I personally wish it had stopped at that, but we are where we are. But I don't think there's any harm in sharing information as long as it's not an instruction, Steve, as long as it's not a case of the government says you can't make a cup of tea at 7:30.
Yeah, that line is the line not to cross, that you can, but the advice would be a bit sensible at it. You don't.
Correct.
No one wants to have a blackout, and actually, maybe you could use, I mean, I wouldn't use my washing machine in the middle of the night. That's a great way to be beaten up by the neighbours. But using things at off-peak, maybe that makes sense.
Well, I think so.
That was one of the suggestions when I saw it.
To put the washing machine on at 3 in the afternoon.
Well, that was one of the suggestions when I last covered this story, but actually putting your washing on at night. So where is the line for you, Steve, to put you on the spot? If it's not washing machines at night, what does the Steve text message to the country say?
The line isn't which item, which thing I can use at what hour. The line is the government can't tell me not to, but it could say, here are some tips.
So you want the carrot approach rather than a stick?
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah, I don't want to be banned from doing anything, but I wouldn't consider it to be some sort of an impingement on my civil liberties that if someone gives me information that I could choose to ignore.
All right.
One concern, briefly, is the infighting that we're sort of witnessing in and around Cabinet. It's not a good look for Liz Truss. She's got to get on top of it.
Oh, yeah.
It seems that everything's a battle.
Yeah.
Battling with Rees-Mogg about government advice about blackouts.
She's had the tax
battling with Braverman about immigration.
And Gove about the benefits in line with inflation.
And I know he's not in the Cabinet, but he's a Tory. And then there's Penny Mordaunt, who's making up the government's benefits policy on the hoof in a speech at conference.
The one good thing she did was get rid of or suspend Conor Burns. I'm not saying I know what he did, but she's immediately got on top of that rather than let it run like Boris with Pincher and with Patterson and other things. Yeah. So she's at least doing that.
He was rubbish at firing people, Boris, wasn't he?
He wanted to be liked too much, I feel, whereas Truss, I think, is less bothered about being liked. That's my sense. And she's prepared to... And she's in a tough position, so she has to make quick calls because she's up against it already.
There you go. Well, look, wise words. You were here. Another from the Telegraph now, and a new currency for Scotland. Steve, how exciting.
Yeah.
Have they already left? Is Scotland independent now?
No, not yet, but maybe give it time. And then we're hearing about what happens with the money, because who gets what in the divorce that would happen. But any country can peg themselves, and that sounds like a weird phrase, but to the pound. It's happened.
What are you pegged to?
I believe it's I am within a very close exchange rate mechanism.
Sounds uncomfortable.
It is, but that's why I'm in this chair. But the point is, they will have to at some point come up with the Scottish pound, which creating a new currency is difficult, or is it? I don't know. These days people do crypto ones. Get Elon Musk involved.
Correct.
But the big issue here is how quickly it happens. At some point, Scotland should have its own money.
Yeah.
And not just like exactly the same money but difficult to spend down south type version.
Yeah.
But the point is, she said there's no timescale, no fixed timescale on when they would replace sterling, which then means how do you debate, how do you plan, how do you work out how things are going to go economically for you? If anything, it's kicking the money can down the road so you don't have to have the difficult conversation.
So I guess this currency, what could it be called? Sturge coin?
Sturgeling.
Oh, yeah, sturgeling's not bad, definitely. That sounds like a freakish animal, but maybe Nicola is. The truth is that, you can't... I mean, I've lived in Scotland for a big chunk of my life. It was one of the most beautiful countries in the world, incredible people. It's also a great economy that punches above its weight, but you do wonder about the strength of a currency that small, don't you? An economy that small with that much national debt. Yeah, and some people say that that's why they would need this flexible, free-to-move currency to try and sort out the debts early doors. Clearly, it's not as good if you are no longer part of the United Kingdom and the Bank of England gets to make your interest rate decisions for you. They lose the ability to control their own interest rates. Right.
You wouldn't want that. Independence would be about control. Of course, we know what the secret squirrel plan is, don't we, Nick? And it's about getting Scotland out of the UK and into the EU. That's the long-term plan.
I was going to say, I'm surprised they don't want the euro. They love the EU so much and they want to marry it. Why don't they have the euro? You're right, they couldn't control their interest rates and money supply. People have compared it to Panama using US dollars. So it would be a strange situation. Like a lot of things with independence, the plan is vague. They just want to do the independence bit, then we'll sort out all that red tape about money and stuff later on. And I like this point here. Someone warned that they would need a separate currency not linked to sterling in order to pay the country's multi-billion-pound balance of payments deficit. There is that. And that was a point made by Ronald McDonald, who is still much less of a clown than Sturgeon. Just wanted to say that. This is Ronald McDonald from the Adam Smith Business School. Sounds quite sound.
You both spent time in Scotland as performers at the Edinburgh Fringe. I'm just wondering whether they could fall back on some other reliable currencies, such as McEwen's 80 or Tunnock's tea cakes.
Oh, Tunnock. Oh, imagine the exchange
like a
rate on those
stereotype.
these days.
Yeah, that's it. So you like exchange goods and you go, I've got 6 Tunnock's tea cakes and now they're not even squashed at the top.
But due to, I mean, that might have to devalue and therefore their millionaire shortbread suddenly becomes billionaire shortbread.
Very inflationary. Asking for trouble. Look at that. Look at that ready wit. That's what you pay the big bucks for, folks. Saturday's Express now, and a change to the Iranian regime might be around the corner, Nick. A serious story, but potential good news long term.
Exactly, yeah, for a change. Beginning at the end, so Ayatollah Khamenei, is that right, to see Iran regime collapse as protests surge?
Yeah.
So this is obviously following the horrific death of Mahsa Amini by the morality police, bizarrely named, as we've said before.
Yeah.
But this is an expert, Dr. Roham Al-Vandi, and he's saying that what's remarkable is that unlike previous protests where people would flee the scene, what we're seeing is protests that, where unarmed young people are standing their ground. Yeah. And I suppose it's their thirst for freedom has overridden their fear, basically. And it's a key point because what can you do at that point when people just say we're not afraid anymore? It's a very powerful moment. And so he's saying that it's the beginning of the end for the Islamic Republic. Now, of course, Khamenei has a different take, and he claims that he was also sad about the death of Amini and that actually these are all just US schemes and that the US, along with Iranians in America, are making all this happen. And if it wasn't her death, it would be another issue and they're all plotting. But the less sort of mad interpretation is just that they've had enough and they want freedom back.
Yep, the sooner that regime ends, the better, in my view. I don't care about balance when it comes to that outfit. On to Saturday's Times now. And if you don't like fracking, well, Steve, every man has his price.
Yeah, and if it's £1,000, I've got good news for you. Because households near the fracking sites could be offered, actually, it's up to £1,000. You get £500 or £1,000. I mean, yeah, you might get earthquakes and your drinking water might be flammable, but then again, who doesn't love a fun fair and a sambuca? So stop me complaining, you anti-growther. I thought it was interesting about this, the idea that it's a way of getting local consent. This is the hot issue, I think, with fracking at the moment. Local consent. How will it be defined? How will it be measured? What percentage would you need? I mean, Parliament needs supermajority for some things, but Jacob Rees-Mogg was speaking about 50% plus one. Maybe that's fair enough, that's the majority. He was also in the article talking about fracking companies going around knocking on doors. And what happens if you're not home? Yeah. You could time it, right, to make sure you get any kind of results. That's the big issue, because I hope this government sticks to the word about having local consent, because it's the voice of the people. Yeah. And if anyone should be listened to, it's the people. We're on a station.
Well,
it's
indeed.
All about being the people's.
Now, you're a bit of a chemist, and by that I don't mean you sell Oral-B toothpaste and mouthwash.
I've got some, though, if you want.
And condoms. But can I ask you whether you think fracking is as bad as some people say? Because it's been successful in America, hasn't it? And it was actually not Joe Biden, it was Barack Obama who granted those fracking licenses 10 years ago. America is energy independent thanks to fracking. So has that turned your head at all?
It is slightly different, the scale of the country. I mean, this is not going to be chemistry. Straight away, I'll say I've got a rough understanding of the chemicals.
By the way, when you do the chemistry bit, do you want to, wear a white jacket or something?
Yeah, if I could get something with elbow pads as well, I could get in there.
I think so. I think you need a prop just to add the authority.
But
anyway, let's go with this for now.
It's more physics, more, the seismology.
Oh, I see.
But the space of America means you can do it in a place where if you get some one-ish on the Richter scale earthquake, you're not going to feel it by the time you get to where people live. It's harder to do that over here. Plus, also, 1 on the Richter scale is our current limit, and there's talk of saying, oh, yeah, we didn't manage to stick to that last time. Maybe we should change the limit. That feels more like fudge than actual research.
What do you think, Nick?
Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg said he'd be delighted to have fracking in his own back garden, which was quite bold. But if someone offered me £1,000, I'd actually get more suspicious. I'm like, it's totally safe. We'll give you £1,000. Like, oh, I thought it was safe and fine. Yeah, but take the money. That makes me a bit suspicious. But one of the criticisms of fracking is that, it doesn't generate enough energy. I'm not an expert of it. People say it's not worth it for the amount of energy it generates, but don't tell Leo Kearse, because he's the fracking spokesman for the UK.
The end product is clean, isn't it? It's a pretty clean fossil fuel. And you just wonder whether it's worth exploring. Because, were you not concerned by the fact that it was The Guardian that reported several years ago that Vladimir Putin and his regime actually generated misinformation on social media about fracking in order to discourage Britain from exploring shale gas.
Yeah, but there was a story that we covered on this show a couple of months ago about how the science hasn't moved on, the ability to predict whether there will be a seismic event, which is scary language, but if we're talking 1 on the Richter scale...
What would that be? Would that be like a Boyzone console?
Yeah, that's it, if everyone jumps up and down at once. But the answer for that should be more research is needed, not... oh, well, let's ignore it anyway and plough on. So I agree, we shouldn't listen to disinformation. We should get more information. That's not the same as ploughing on because we ideologically like it.
Very wise from my panel. It won't last. Let's have a look now at The Guardian. And the left are winding up the right this time with blue screen technology. Nick?
Yeah, Guardian saying winding up the other side, left-wing designers CGI bomb Tory speeches. And this was a WhatsApp group of Labour Party graphic designers, which sound like the worst people in the world. And I believe we've got some videos of it.
We do. Let's have a look. Thank you very much to Richard and Sophia for that. There's the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng crashing the markets as he speaks.
Yeah. It's not that good, though, is it?
Ed Conway in the background from Sky.
Don't you find, Mark, the left can't meme? I think this is a classic example. They're not particularly good. They're not particularly satirical. There's one of Suella in a minute, probably.
It's also a bit harsh, by the way, because those graphs are actually... that's a trajectory that happened before his conference speech.
Yeah, and this is Suella supposed to be some sort of big, sort of fascistic, Star Wars Empire-esque leader, but it's not particularly convincing to me.
No.
I don't think we've pointed out what's happening yet, though. The fact that it was blue in the background means you can do inappropriately called green screen.
Yeah, basically there was a WhatsApp group and they realised, oh, because of the blue background, we can do these amusing green screens and we can have a great time. And this was the Labour graphic designers who sound like people who drink real ale and the kind of thing James O'Brien would be in if he had any skills, basically, is how I describe it. And,
I think he's a very skilled broadcaster. It's just that some
any other
agree
skills
with what he says.
That's correct.
But look, here's the
Great
thing.
Man.
You've got this green screen, blue screen stuff. Is this not the right, not being able to laugh at themselves?
I could laugh at it if it was any good. It's just then it's not that good. I watched them. They're sort of, oh yes, Suella's a sort of fascist. She's not. And then all right, Kwasi, he's had plenty of criticism about the budget. Fine. And then the other one, there was one that was all right. I just didn't think they were that good. Oh, the Liz Truss one was slightly better. I just didn't think they were that good. Did you think they were amazing?
Isn't the joke that this is what happens when you stand in front of a screen that you haven't worked out will be editable?
Yes, that is. But then what you do with it could at least be funny. And I didn't strike me as that
funny.
Here's
a question as we go into the break. You're both incredible comedians. What's funnier, left-wing comedy or right-wing comedy?
It entirely depends on the point of view of the person watching it, as Twitter shows.
You're setting us up there, Mark. Right-wing comedy is a thing that's sort of used to attack people. Really, it just means comedy that doesn't go along with a very narrow, specific, woke agenda. It just means comedy, usually, rather than...
You get to redefine the term before you answer the question. It makes it look...
Well, no, they've defined it weirdly in the first place. They've said it's right-wing. It's not really right. We just want normal comedy back, Steve, which used to be normal until about 10 minutes ago.
Right.
Till you guys destroyed it.
Ruined it, didn't it?
There you go. Well, look, it's about time to press Steve's lab coats. But we're coming back in part 2 with lots more, including the history class taking segregation a bit too literally, the shocking place where microplastics have been found, and the new surveillance state that targets women. Lots of big stories. See you shortly.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers, tonight in the company of Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon.
Nick N. Dixon.
Exactly right. Two brilliant comedians, acquaintances, we're not friends. There's no chemistry, but it's a work thing. Saturday's Telegraph, and segregation is back, ironically, in a history class. Nick.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. White students banned from Black History Month events at Westminster University, and it's as stupid as it sounds. So they're being accused of racial segregation, because that's what they're doing. Dr. Neil Thin, a social anthropology lecturer at Edinburgh University, has said copying the racial segregationism that we've previously seen in South African and USA education systems is bitterly ironic. He says to see the rhetoric of safe spaces abused to justify racial segregation. Now, Toby Young, full disclosure, I do a weekly podcast with him called The Weekly Skeptic, available on all formats. He says, at some point, you think it would be clear to these zealots that you're not going to reduce racial discrimination by discriminating against people on the basis of their race, but they're so blinded by ideological groupthink, they cannot see this glaring contradiction. And I would say the same. A spokesman here for talks about Black Lives Matter commitments, even though Black Lives Matter have been largely discredited. And this person said that equality of opportunity does not always mean giving everyone access to the same thing. That is literally what it means. So that was stupid as well. And it just reminds me of the Brett Weinstein incident from Evergreen University, when this kind of stuff started to happen more frequently. He was a Jewish professor banned from campus for a day. They said, no, you're not allowed on campus today. And that rang alarm bells to him as a Jewish person, quite reasonably. Correct. And that kind of red-pilled him from being a very, very left-wing person to still being left-wing, but questioning some of the excesses of what we could call the woke left, whatever you want to call it. And this is just another example. And I think we've accepted far too much of this identity politics. And Kanye had that satirical take on it recently, the other day, wearing the White Lives Matter top. I think we've
Candice Owens, who's a black political commentator.
Exactly. And people were outraged at this, calling it racist, that a black man in America, it says White Lives Matter. It's about the least racist possible sentiment. And just briefly as well, even in the Conservative Party, they've got this 2022 group, and they've got this obsession with identity politics, which Calvin Robinson on this channel has been very critical of. So I think we need to reject identity politics wherever it turns up, because it leads to things like this, racial segregation.
I'm interested in the fact that you say all available formats. Can I still cassette?
Yes, you can get our podcast, The Weekly Skeptic, available on cassette now.
Or for £100, he'll come around, sit next to you on your bed and just read it.
I'll just say it, yeah. It's a lot like this. You'd hate it.
For £200
it's just my opinions for an hour. It's your absolute nightmare. But for everyone else, check it out. I turned the camera there.
Look, what do we think about this? Definitely Nick is excised about this story. It doesn't look great, does it? I mean, perhaps we need to look at the context, but I just wonder whether separating people based upon skin colour might not be the way to go.
And this could be happening at an event that talks about how bad segregation is. So there'll be irony there. But also, and I believe this would be the case, getting messages out there, educating, surely the goal. Surely the aim is to have more people informed to be less racist, means you'd want more people involved with things. So I think...
More people not of colour, ironically.
Yeah.
Because arguably it's perhaps people who are not of colour that would benefit most from Black History Month.
So you're saying the only people who should be involved in Black History Month are white people, Mark?
Well, I think everyone. Yeah, I do. I think that we're all brothers and sisters in the eyes of God, aren't we? And when will these academic institutions understand that we've got to stop picking each other out based upon skin pigmentation? Who cares?
But still, the clip that I'll take is the earlier bit that makes you look bad. But I'll love the internet.
Definitely, no. Not having it. It does seem like the world's gone mad with that story. I think it's an example of how the woke monster will just consume itself eventually. Well, here's hoping. Saturday's Guardian and the kids are causing trouble, but this time it's not their fault, Steve.
No, it's the cost of them. which is kind of their fault as well, as I'm learning the hard way. Now I've got a little lad. He's just over 6 months old now, so I'm learning about this. Childcare. Nursery for under 2s cost parents in England 65% of their wage. Unsustainable. So the number of women, this article mainly talks about women, and as someone who is, I'm the main stay-at-home person out of me and my missus, she is just better at her job, so she's gone back to her job more. I'm not working as much, I'm looking after the lad more. So it'd be nice if this whole article admitted that maybe some blokes do it as well. Although I spend most of my time looking after my kid, teaching him to call me mum just to wind up the missus.
By the way, for those that don't know, full disclosure, he's such a great house husband. He was breastfeeding during the break. I thought it was pretty.
You've got to have a hobby, haven't you? But
I don't know why it was Nick, but each to their own.
It means that the cost is so huge, it means it's hard to get back to work. If you're going to go around talking about growth and an increase in productivity, surely you want more people being able to do the work they would like to do. And we all benefit. Like, if someone goes to work, that helps the society. So maybe society should, in some way, pay for my child to be looked after.
I know, listen, I really think that childcare is a good idea, and I think it's money well spent. What do you think, Nick?
Well, it's interesting because it's costing parents 65% of their wage to have childcare, and that's obviously bad because it might discourage people from even having children. Yet, here's a weird twist, that the number of women not looking to work and having to look after their family instead has risen by 5%. So in a weird way, if you're a social conservative, the sheer cost has forced women back to raising their children at home. I mean, it's a strange win, but it's one that I'm clutching.
Wouldn't you want people to choose to stay at home if they chose to rather than be forced to?
Ideally, Steve, you want the carrot, but sometimes it has to be the stick.
No, it doesn't. Let people work.
No, it probably is a bad thing, but in a way, the whole problem started when women were sort of, the idea was, oh, women are liberated to go into the workplace. But wasn't it, Steve, just a sort of capitalist con? And really, suddenly, you had to have 2 incomes, where previously you only had to have 1. You know, in Eastern Europe, they consider it normal for both parents to have to work because they're poor. You know, they're much poorer. So should we have to do? You see your point?
I've heard that argument, but if you find, all you need to do is find one person who wants to work. I suppose it needs to be a woman. You find a woman who actually says, no, I want this career. I have goals and aspirations bigger than what you set out for me. Then all of a sudden, your argument, just looking at almost a kind of conspiracy look at it, falls away pretty quickly. Not
really conspiracy. It's how consumerist society works. But
no, but you've assigned motivation to it.
Well, but isn't there in a case that it becomes a stigma to just say, hey, I just want to raise my kids, so there becomes a social pressure, and some women find actually my job isn't that fulfilling. As Jordan Peterson says, most people won't have a great career; they'll just have a job, and that's the reality. So they get conned into thinking, oh, it'll be this great career. Actually, they've just replaced. And it's another kind of oppression where a boss is oppressing them instead of, you know, the family or whatever.
But you solve that problem just by making sure we don't have stigma, people staying at home to look after the kids. You're talking to someone who's literally doing it. I hope there's no stigma in me doing far less work to raise a child.
But it was your side, Steve, not you personally, that stigmatised it by, you know, with the whole feminist movement stigmatising women who just want to do traditional things.
But ignore the stigma rather than take it right back. What was a good time?
Let's go back.
1800.
I'm fine with 1900.
Okay,
pre the vote.
I'm all for you doing loads of childcare, but you could have washed that vomit off your shirt, is all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. It's not even the kids.
Who knew? Look, can we develop breastfeeding as a topic? Because it's in The Guardian, and it's an example of how plastics are everywhere. Nick?
Microplastics, Mark. They're micro ones, and they're found in human breast milk for the first time. I'm saying it's like it's a fun thing. It's a terrible thing. It's an absolute disaster. We did a story before about, I think, microplastics found in blood, which is already thought to be very bad. But now it's saying infants are especially vulnerable to chemical contaminants. But it does point out that it's still far better to breastfeed than not, Steve. So keep it up. Don't stop, because it reveals at the bottom that bottle-fed babies are likely to be swallowing millions of microplastics a day. So if you breastfeed, you'll be getting some microplastics, but some good things. Bottle feeding, you'll just be having endless plastic. And the big problem with this is, everyone's saying it's really dangerous and bad, possibly, but we can't do anything about it anyway. It's kind of like Putin's nuclear Armageddon. We just have to go, yes, it could kill us all, or it might not.
But we could use less plastic.
There's that.
Is the genie not out of the lamp now?
But we could, well, that's why I'm saying less. I don't think we'll ever get rid of plastic, and you wouldn't want to. Hospitals work so well because plastics can be sterilised and replaced, and that's great. But you don't need as many throwaway items to be made out of plastic. That is purely convenience, because it's such a malleable product. Whatever little polymerised, whatever it is, you can make great things out of it. But if the thing you've made is going to stay around for 500 years, maybe you shouldn't be using it in a disposable fashion.
You should at least make it look really nice. I mean, look, doesn't it, but Steve, it says here the ubiquitous presence of microplastics in the environment makes human exposure inevitable. So, but you're saying tone it down a bit. Babies swallowing millions of microplastics, you'll get it down to like the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, but you're missing the dimension of time. It's inevitable now, but if we stop using it now, a couple of hundred years in the future, actually, when were plastics invented? Bakelite was the first one. Was that in the 60s or something?
Okay.
Must have been before then, 50s. So you're not talking hundreds of years. We can, if we cut back using them now, give it some years, there will be less. There is something we can do. The word inevitable there is covering too much. It's making it too easy for us to throw these papers up in the air and say, let's just plough on.
It comes from The Guardian, so I'm glad that you've criticised it.
I always disagree with them.
Of course, I'm glad to hear it. The show's all about opinions. It's a broad church, isn't it? Containing some weird priests. Saturday's Guardian, and Biden is putting more pressure on China in the form of tech restrictions. Steve?
Yes, the Biden administration imposing sweeping tech restrictions on China. Biden's not the kind of guy you think would be good at tech. He's got the vibe of someone who gets his son to set up his Wi-Fi. Probably not the laptop, though, when you think about who the kid is. You'd like that joke, wouldn't you? It's a Hunter Biden laptop joke.
Good one.
But the new rules include measures to exclude China from using semiconductor chips made anywhere in the world but were made with American tools. I'm sure there's some sense to this that I don't quite get my head around. I understand not buying tech that has been made by China if you fear for the security side of it. Maybe there's a built-in hardwired backdoor. I'm using phrases I don't thoroughly understand.
It works for me, like the Huawei 5G technology, which the UK rejected.
Yeah, but then this story is saying, OK, if our technology has been used to make these superconductors, these chips then won't be available to China. Have you seen China? They're going to work out how to make their own. So this will be a short-lived protest.
I know this sort of plays into the narrative, really, that China have already won.
I don't know if they've won, but there's certainly been a lot of complacency about China, particularly from the left in America. People like Bannon and Trump have been very hawkish on China, whereas Biden, I think, has been a bit complacent, maybe because his son was doing business deals with him. But this, I wonder if he's getting ahead of apparently Taiwan is responsible for most of the semiconductors. Is that correct? And I just wonder if they're getting ahead of the coming semiconductor war. They think China will invade Taiwan and get all their semiconductors. So he's saying, well, you can't have our semiconductors. Do you think? I haven't thought it through that much. I just thought of it tonight.
Yeah.
I think I'm right, though.
Yeah, well, ill-thought-through opinions is what this show's all about. So let's get to some more. On Saturday's Telegraph, and it's literally 1984, if you're a woman, Nick.
Yeah, there's a new surveillance state, and women are the target, say the Telegraph. So this is period tracking apps, car license plate data, which seems more universal, and pregnancy registers, and they're using them to... Essentially, they're using them to check if women may have been pregnant and try to get a now illegal abortion in certain states of America, for example. And the article is, I can tell, very anti-abortion. It says at one point, Roe versus Wade, which eliminated the constitutional right to an abortion. But, of course, abortion was never really in the Constitution. It was just a weak legal ruling. But anyway, I do sympathise because although abortion is a terrible thing, and I am pro-life, I don't think the way to do it, speaking of carrots and sticks, is to track women with surveillance technology to see if they have had a period or see if they're pregnant. So I am against that, and that's what these apps are doing.
It's a battle of what you hate more, isn't it? Do you hate the idea of the state tracking you, or do you hate abortions?
It's exactly
You've got to pick a side on this one,
I know. And I just think I've gone with... What I think is women should be given options, and they should be treated in a caring way and given other options than abortion, but they shouldn't be tracked by an authoritarian hellscape.
Yeah, and that is what this story is about. So actually, you can just trim it down to you shouldn't be tracked by an authoritarian hellscape.
That should be the headline.
Yeah. I mean, it seems ridiculous that people would have been using these apps honestly, in good faith, presuming that the data wouldn't be given to some third party. And we give too much information to our phones.
And the point is, prosecutors will be able to use them in building a case against someone now.
Yeah.
So
well, we'll be keeping a close eye on Nick Dixon and Steve N. Allen in the final part of the show, because coming up we have digging up graves to summon spirits, not so dead people, and a penis pear fruit. Each to their own. See you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Mark Dolan, tonight in the company of the hugely talented comedians Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. And let's get to our next story, Saturday's Guardian, and things are heating up in the Bake Off tent with a set of accusations that, well, are pretty spicy, aren't they, Nick?
Ah, the Bake Off one, yeah. So Great British Bake Off accused of cultural appropriation in Mexican Week, and chefs say the episode featuring sombreros and maracas takes the perception of the culture back years. One of the chefs said 10 years. So, look, I've seen videos where Mexican people have said we don't mind the so-called cultural appropriation, we just see it as a celebration of our culture. Also, cultural appropriation doesn't really exist, does it? And if it does, it's just so ubiquitous that it's everything. Also, it never gets used the other way. They never say, oh, people are culturally appropriating football off us, you know, because we invented loads of stuff. But anyway, I do understand the point that Mexican food is a lot more rich and nuanced than this show indicated. Then again, it's a broad TV show that's entertainment. It's not an in-depth study of Mexican food. But having said that, any attack on the BBC is quite fun, isn't it?
Is Bake Off not Channel 4 these days?
Any attack on Channel 4 is quite fun, isn't it? Oh, yeah, you're right. I like attacking them both.
Director Faye might have the photograph of the boys. It's Noel Fielding and, of course, Matt Lucas.
I thought it was Paul Scholes.
I mean, the bottom line is that I would suggest they're celebrating Mexican culture.
Oh, you think that's the defence? You see, I think the defence for it is that they are not trying to accurately portray Mexican culture. That almost in the world there exists actual Mexican culture, and the dressed up, probably inspired by Americans thought on this. And it's more than that, they're doing parody seems too harsh. But I also, when you read the article, it looks like they had to go and find people to be upset by it.
Right.
It's not as if, I read the whole thing, working out who's accusing them of cultural appropriation.
Quite deep in it.
And it's kind of a bit of Twitter and people they called up to complain.
Is the sombrero Mexican blackface?
No.
No.
There you go. Fair agreement from the panel. Let's move on now to Saturday's Mirror, and it's The Walking Dead, Steve.
I hate that I've got this one, because this one weirds me out. Morgue horrified after opening body bag to find evidence that the man that was put in it was still alive and died in the back. Which is everyone's worst nightmare, isn't it? It is. So the doctors reportedly thought that this 55-year-old man was dead. He was sent to the morgue. It's in Australia. But then experts believed he was still alive and tried to climb out when they found fresh blood on him that shouldn't have been there. It weirds me out because it's very much like the plot of a Twilight Zone that I shouldn't have been allowed to watch as a kid. But it's still in my head of this woman. If you don't mind, I'll just tell you the plot. Please. Woman in this prison, she's innocent. She needs to escape. And she's friends with the guy in charge of the prison morgue. And they've come up with an idea. He'll put her in the coffin, or she sneaks into a coffin. And then he turns up the next couple of days after it's been buried and digs her out. Next, she gets in there. Nothing seems to happen for a while. She's like, this is taking ages. She lights a match. It's the guy who runs the morgue who's dead.
Oh, that's pretty unfortunate.
And so since then...
So it's not foul play, it's just that she can't be released by the guy.
And That terrifies me. If I have any phobia, the idea of being buried alive, no one likes it, but it weirds me out.
I was going to watch The Twilight Zone later, so
ruined it for
there
me.
goes my evening.
Yeah, it's a great episode.
It's going to be repeats of some mothers do have them now. Nick Dixon, have you spent time in morgues?
Less so these days, Mark.
What do you think of morgues? What's Nick Dixon's hot take on dead bodies?
What's my hot take on morgues? Is that your question? I'm sort of on the fence on morgues, Mark. They seem necessary. I'm not a fan, but they seem perhaps necessary in a utilitarian sense. I'm
better in the 1900s?
Yeah, most things were, Steve. Thank you for helping me out.
Too woke these days?
Yeah, woke morgues. Yeah, they'll be tweeting me about that one if I talk about woke morgues. Well, the part I noted in this story, Mark, was that Paul Forden, the Health Service Chief Executive, insisted that a body could move after death. That was his attempt to get out of it.
Yeah.
Which, of course, it can, but it's only happened once in history, as we know. Don't want to push my religious agenda, though, tonight. But
well, I don't blame you. Now, Saturday's Daily Star, and it's the 21st century version of Burke and Hare. Nick, tell us more.
Oh, yes. Brits digging up graves to flog human skulls. Is this the one we're talking about? Oh, yeah. Yeah, on Facebook,
very dark,
as Ouija board pieces. I know, this is not pleasant. A massive unregulated market for human remains exists on social media platforms with, I mean, it's disgusting, but one of them was a lamp made from a skull, bit Nazi, and pierced with nails with "Kill Me" emblazoned across it. And there's no law...
I gave one of those to my mother-in-law last Christmas.
How did that go? Probably about as well as your morgue question.
Lead balloon.
Incredibly, there's no law, Mark, in the UK against buying and selling of human remains, given that the items were acquired legally. Think about how many things we do have laws for. There's a law about handling salmon in suspicious circumstances. OK, you'll know it, Steve, Section 32 in the 1986 Salmon Act.
Yeah.
But there isn't a law about digging up dead skulls and selling them on Facebook. Facebook, of course, is against it. They've been very clear about that, and they've said it's violating their standards. So they do have some standards. Obviously, Mark, this is the result of a debased, godless society where anything goes.
As one of those members of the godless society, and therefore not worried about any afterlife or anything like that, as soon as the energy in my synapses stops, I'm gone. I'd love to end up as a lamp, though. I quite like... You don't have to dig me up. I'd love that.
Well, I would turn you on any time, Steve, let me tell you that. And I'd love to pull your chain.
Any more?
I'd love to...
Something about a plug?
I'd love to screw a bulb into you.
I'd love to sell you on Facebook.
Moving swiftly on. After that illuminating image, let's talk about the shower, and it's where a lot of people have good ideas. This is in The Independent, Steve.
What's going to happen when we talk to you about showering?
Good luck with that.
It'll be really serious, weirdly, on that one.
So scientists have discovered why you have your good ideas in the shower. And if they didn't discover this in a shower, I call time on this story. They didn't, apparently. They've done research at the University of Virginia. Previously, they were trying to work out whether it's to do with distraction or whatever, but they did this test where some of the sample sat down and watched a scene from When Harry Met Sally. We all know which scene we're presuming it's about.
I'll have what scene, the orgasm scene in the cafe?
Yeah, I'll have what she's having. That one.
Yeah.
A darn good time. And the others were watching a video of someone folding sheets, which I believe is part of a Netflix new commission. And they worked out that the people who saw something from When Harry Met Sally came up with more creative ideas to solve a problem afterwards. And somehow, I mean, what do they think people are doing in the shower if they're comparing it to that scene from When Harry Met Sally?
You do wonder, don't you? The mind boggles. The thing is, Nick, the hot water on the head is actually, I think, quite good for the brain cells and things like that. So maybe that's what's going on with the shower.
I can only afford cold, Mark, but you're up there in the posher area than me. But you'll have to tell me about it. Well, there was quite a sort of moderate conclusion. It was that actually the engaging tasks led to productive mind wandering, but boring tasks may be beneficial because they oscillate between periods of being focused and unbounded thought. So it didn't really conclude even which one the better one was.
Yeah, it doesn't strike me as really good science.
No.
Why are we even looking into this?
Good question. Yeah.
OK. Well, that shower story turned out to be a bit of a damp squib. Let's have a look at The Independent. Actually, no, we've done that. Let's move on now to Saturday's Mail. And more young people than ever are apparently identifying as members of the LGBTQ+ community, Steve.
Yeah, they've looked at it by comparing Gen Z. I know people say Z. I'm not doing that.
Because we're not in America.
Yeah, and so around a quarter of the Gen Zs identify as LGBTQ compared to less than 10% of the baby boomers. They've actually done it by surveying who identifies as straight. So let's look at the stats on that.
And by the way, Gen Z, 16 to 25-year-olds?
Yes.
OK.
And in between, you've got your millennials and your Gen Xers, which I belong to. I believe you're a millennial over there, my millennial friend. Baby boomers, this is is people who identify as straight, 91%, Gen X, 87%, Millennials, 82%, Gen Z, 71%. So the actual stats are more of a curve than the headline makes. They're just comparing the two ends of these things to make it seem more shocking. But then I did think it was interesting when they surveyed the baby boomers, none of them responded that they were asexual or pansexual. And I think it just goes to show that if you don't understand a word, you probably don't identify as it.
Although pan seems quite a 60s figure in many ways.
Like pan's people?
Yeah, the sort of pan, that sort of hippie kind of, you know, whatever.
I'm attracted to those women from Top of the Pops.
Yeah, but the whole... Anyway, who cares? Yeah, my question, Steve, because you raised the statistical thing, and stats aren't my strong point. When I looked this up, in 8% of this age group in 2020 identified as LGBT, so they've got it to a sort of shocking quarter. Really, has that really changed that much in 2 years, or are they manipulating statistics? I mean, the one I saw was a government thing that said it was 8% in that age group.
So they did this by getting... This is self-identifiable, or self-answering, I suppose. So are you comparing results from a different survey with the results?
I am, because I think this is too high.
But then you're falling into the scientific trap of finding data that fits your conclusion.
I love doing that. That's brilliant.
Confirmation bias keeps you warm at night.
Yeah, but Mike, do you really think it's this high, Steve? And Mike, I think it's that people think it's cool now to identify as that. I was speaking to a girl in her 20s, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'm sort of bisexual." When grilled a little more thoroughly, it turned out she had kissed her friend when she was drunk, and she had a rich boyfriend who she was inevitably going to marry. She wasn't bisexual. She just thought it was cool to say. Isn't there a certain amount of that going on?
But do you think that's a new thing, or has it slowly been increasing ever since baby boom?
It's been increasing because it's more in the media, and it's just a cool trend now.
But I think there's also a tendency to make it seem like it's a modern thing. Oh, it's happening now, but these stats don't show it. And your point of view actually doesn't disprove that it's not this curve. I think even if you think it is a trend and it's to do with being cool, then it's slowly been increasing, which fits the stats. It means you don't get to blame it on the W word. I know everyone likes blaming it on wokeness.
Oh, I still will when you're not here.
But Generation X, blame it on political correctness, and before that, right-onness. There was always a phrase for it.
Because you know, this is a business about millennials and Gen Z. I'm in Generation God, I'm old. Can you explain to me this pansexual thing? And it's a family show, but how is the pan involved? Where does the pan go? Is it aluminium, Teflon? I mean, we assume it'd be non-stick. Do you start with the handle?
I knew there'd be a third one.
We're all trying to stay within broadcast regulations, so we've gone with saying nothing.
Where does the handle go? Is it just wipe clean and...
What was that?
Let's have a look at the Times now, the country's newspaper of record, and let's talk about jazz. Nick.
Scientists swing into action to explain mysteries of jazz. So this is a whole article about what makes swing swing, and no one can define it. Is it the first note being held longer than the second? Is it something to do with the syncopation and the offbeats? It's far too complicated to explain in the time we have. But what I can conclude is that analysing swing is not swing. That's the least swing thing you can do.
Actually, could you go into more detail, because I don't want to talk about pans anymore?
Well, basically, Mark, it depends. They did a thing where they delayed they did the downbeat. They delayed the downbeats by 30 milliseconds, and delaying both downbeats and offbeats did not yield swing. However, swing did emerge when only the soloist downbeats were delayed, while the offbeats remained in sync with the rhythm section. I'm sure you're glad you asked.
I think we're being trolled. Just because this is an actual physicist from the Max Planck Institute. This is proper science. And I think he's just doing some research that we all buy and go like, oh, there's an actual piece of science of jazz.
A very good point. Nick, can we finish on your penis, please?
OK, Mark, it'll be better than that pan bit. The Daily Star goes to bloke finds penis pear in Aldi fruit bag and wife's pals are buying loads of them. So it's a pear, essentially, Mark, that looks a bit like a penis.
I think we might have a picture.
Better than the other way round.
Oh, no, we do, but not to broadcast.
We just have to describe it. It's like the radio. It's better than a penis in the shape of a pear. I think we can all agree, probably.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, this should have been the top story really, rather than Putin's nuclear Armageddon.
It is Worry Willy like, isn't it?
It looked a bit small to me. I don't know about you guys, but
no, I'd go the other way. To me, it looked like a medium-sized frying pan, like a tea fowl.
Does this mean that if you were being chased, you could hide in a grocer's by blending in with the pears?
I see what you mean.
You just, get involved in...
Just use a little bit of green dye. Think positive thoughts.
It's such a pity we couldn't license the picture of the penis pear, isn't it?
I drew one, but they said no.
The whole show should be an hour of describing erotic fruits.
Well,
I'm pitching that tomorrow.
Can I just say that you're a right pair of erotic fruits, the pair of you. I want to thank you for your contribution tonight. I feel we've learned and we've laughed. Listen, well done to the brilliant Nick Dixon and Steve N. Allen. They'll be back very soon. We're back with more headliners tomorrow at 11 and Mark Dolan tonight from 9. See you then.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.